Welcome to BHN to Professor Paul Moon from AUT. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
Very, very pleased to have you with us. And I have to say, we have this little conversation sometimes after the show as to who has the best background. Your books and your bookshelf is up there at the moment. It's pretty good. It's a good look.
It's a winning look.
It's a winning look. Hey, listen, the reason we asked you to jump in, and thank you very much for giving us a little bit of time here, was I actually noticed a comment that you made or a post you put up on LinkedIn the other day. And let me bring it up because it's specifically talking to the Ukraine-Russia situation. Now, it is 4 days ago this has been up there, so I'd be interested to get your take then, and maybe it's your perspective has changed now, I'm not sure. But it's a perspective that I haven't heard talked about in the media too much at the moment, which is a tangible conversation of peace. The post you put up that people are looking at right now, let me make that a little bit bigger so people can actually see it. It says, a thought for Russia and Ukraine, let us beat swords into plowshares, and then it's got a picture here of the statue at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Now, for people who don't understand or don't know what that reference means, the statue title, which is let us beat swords into plowshares, is derived from Isaiah 2:4 in the Bible, which says, God shall judge between nations and shall decide for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares. And basically saying, take your weapons and make them things of peace or things of productivity. Because we say you can go and plow the field with those swords rather than cut people down. Would that be a fair synopsis of what you would understand and interpret that to mean?
Very much so.
Okay. I'd love to just open the floor to you and get your thoughts on that post you put up and anything you'd like to add and share about Ukraine and Russia at the moment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Right. Well, the first point, of course, is that that statue is outside a UN building, so it resonates with the role of the UN. But I think more importantly, it fits in with the model of conflicts over the last couple of hundred years, at least in the West. That model is that all wars come to an end.
Mm-hmm.
They come to the end in the form of a peace settlement. And so one of the functions of wars, perversely, is to get the best peace settlement you can get for your particular side. And I suspect that going into this particular war, Putin had a set of objectives, which was to further neutralize Ukraine as what he sees as a potential threat through the extension of NATO, and perhaps to drive a wedge through NATO by having some countries sympathetic to him, some countries hostile to him within the NATO bloc. He failed on both those accounts. So I suspect at the moment he'll be recalibrating what he thinks the peace settlement will look like. And one of the things that a lot of commentators have forgotten is this really isn't about the fighting. The fighting is to secure a certain peace objective. And the more destruction, perhaps, or the more incursion that Putin achieves, he might be rationalizing that puts him in a stronger position when it comes to a peace settlement.
He may be rationalizing that, but do you think he's actually, I mean, as the world looks at it and gets, pardon the phrase, but more and more pissed every day is what they see going on, it could actually be weakening. I mean, there are a lot of commentators who are saying this is almost showing Putin weakness with what's going on at the moment.
Yeah. In various fields, it's shown militarily that the equipment and the technology that Russia boasted about, particularly in terms of artillery, they're an artillery-heavy army, hasn't been quite the force that people imagined. And he's shown his hands, and it almost looks like the death of a superpower that was born after the Second World War. This is its last puff of breath. It looks frail, rusty, incompetent. Operationally, it's got some real challenges. And you'd have to say that it's very, very difficult for Putin to come back from this and have any sort of impact in the world. And of course, his own people are looking on this. The Russians are looking on their leader and thinking, well, he's pretty inept. He's miscalculated time and time again. And we're enduring very bitter consequences for this. So internationally, his reputation is shot. And I think domestically, he's going to suffer for this.
You talked about the peace settlement, and it's sort of, I don't want to minimize it and make it sound like I'm speaking frivolously here, but I think about buying and selling houses. Like, there's that negotiation backwards and forwards and what you'd really pay and what you really wouldn't. You look for that settlement. You look for the best outcome for yourself. What do you think is his best outcome now? Like, if he was looking for that peace settlement or that settlement, what's the best Putin could do out of this now, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's changed dramatically. I think going into this conflict, his best outcome was to split NATO, to make sure that Ukraine never became a member of NATO, effectively to neutralize it, and therefore, in his view, secure his western boundary. Now that things are turning out the way they are, I think he's going to look at his own future, his own prospects for leading Russia, look at the dire state of the economy that he's plunged the country into, and look at the fact that militarily he hasn't got the muscle. And this isn't against another superpower, by the way. This is against a country that isn't even a NATO member, and Russia is struggling. So he's really got problems when it comes to what that peace settlement looks like. And the analogy of the house purchasing is quite useful, because everyone's haggling to get the best deal for themselves, but all of a sudden you find there's rot in the house. That changes the negotiation. And in a sense, there's rot in Putin's house now, that things aren't as stable as they looked like. And he may well be in a position, just financially, the massive cost, something like $30 billion a day to prosecute this war. He may come to the point where he hasn't got that much in the way of bargaining chips anymore.
Yeah, cut loose his losses. Georgie.
Paul, historically, what sort of role or place does the populace or the people have in these peace settlements, and indeed in the sort of the sort of crumbling of these empires or superpowers, right? So we've talked about the sort of rationale and direction of Putin and the Ukrainian government. What role do the people have in beating the swords into ploughshares?
Well, they have quite a lot. If we go back to this issue of a peace settlement, the peace settlements are made between governments, so there's state-to-state agreements. But what you bring to that peace settlement very much depends on the population. And if you look at, and it's anecdotal and it's not all verified, but if you look at the reaction of Russian soldiers in Ukraine, some of them are scratching their heads wondering, what on earth are we doing here?
Yeah. Hardly
motivated. And then you look at some of the Ukrainian troops who are fighting passionately for their country, you'd have to say that the odds are stacking up in favor of Ukraine, because popular sentiment does count for things. And don't forget, leaders are responsive to the population, even in dictatorships. Even Adolf Hitler ran plebiscites after he came to power. They're very sensitive about what the population expects of them. And so if Putin's facing a population that's disgruntled, is protesting, is suffering financially, and feels internationally isolated and embarrassed, the Ukrainians are facing a situation where the whole world, the Western world at least, seems to be backing them. They're very committed to the cause. Then that's going to have an effect on what sort of peace settlement is reached, because no leader can reach a peace settlement, particularly the Ukrainian leadership, which somehow denies the commitment of its own population.
Yeah. Hey, have you seen? I'm sure you have, but I'm just double checking. Have you seen the? I think it was at the UN where one of the ambassadors read out the tweets between the Russian soldier and his mother.
That's right, just before the soldier died.
Yeah, let's play that actually, because I know it's been going around, but I think, speaking to the Russian soldier, and I probably should say I haven't heard that this has been 100% confirmed. So let's just make it very clear that we're putting this out there, believing it to be accurate. But even if it wasn't accurate, I think what you've just said, Paul, is there seems to be a pretty obvious line in some of the Russian soldiers going, what are we doing here? What is this about? This is not what we were told. I think it's fair to draw that assumption. Whether this is 100% accurate or a little bit of political license from someone out there, we're not sure. But I'm going to play it anyway. And yeah, you'll have to read along with it because some of it is in Russian. But this is, and I'll say allegedly, a series of messages between a Russian soldier and his mother.
I would like to read from the screenshot of the smartphone of a killed Russian soldier. That's an actual screenshot from someone who is dead already.
Алёша,
ты как? Почему
how are
так
you
долго
doing?
не отвечаешь?
Why has it been so long since you responded?
Вы точно на учениях?
Are you really in training exercises?
Спрашивает мать убитого солдата.
Asks the mother of the killed soldier.
Моменты перед тем, как он был убит.
Before he was killed.
Мама, я уже не в Крыму.
Mama, I'm no longer in Crimea.
Не на учениях.
I'm not in training sessions.
А где?
Where are you then?
Папа спрашивает, можно ли
Papa is
тебе
asking
послать
whether I can
посылку.
send you a parcel.
Так какую посылку,
What kind
мама?
of a parcel, Mama, can you send me?
Что ты говоришь такое?
What are you
Что
talking about?
случилось?
What happened?
Мама, я на
Mama,
Украине.
I'm in Ukraine.
Тут настоящая
There
война.
is a real war raging
Мне
here.
страшно.
I'm afraid.
Мы бьем по всем городам
We are bombing
подряд.
all of the
Даже
cities
по мирным
together, even targeting
Нам
civilians.
сказали, что они
We
нас
were
будут
told
приветствовать,
that they would welcome us,
а они кидаются под нашу
and
технику.
they are falling under
И не
our
дают
armored
проехать.
vehicles, throwing themselves under the wheels and not allowing us to
Называют
pass.
нас
They
фашистами.
call us fascists.
Мама, мне очень тяжело.
Mama, this is so
In
hard.
several moments he was killed.
This was several moments before he was killed.
I think that's probably all we need to do with that. It's hard to hear, it's hard to hear because I'm going to say allegedly only because I like to be as accurate as I can, but I'm sure those messages are going between families now, whether that one is 100% what's happened or not.
Yeah, this war is yeah, I guess it's good to say things like that because there's this misinformation surrounding a war like this, like any war, right? Yeah. Pat.
Paul, I was going to say as well, I was listening to James O'Brien the other day, who's a talkback host out of the UK. I'm not sure if you know him or not. I think the station's called LBC or something like that. And he pointed to the thing that is scariest, and that's my paraphrase, to Putin, is that his people look west. And what he was saying is, if people see what's happening in the West and looking to what's happening for, the average person in the West and how they live and what they see, that's the thing that he's most fearful of. But he also said the problem is the wealthy within Russia want nothing but all the trappings of the West. So he's fearful of the people looking to the West and seeing how better it could be for them. But also he's fearful of being caught out for enjoying the trappings of the West, him and all the wealthy people as well. And I thought that's a really interesting perspective going. It's a lot more difficult to be a Kim Jong-un, for example, and keep everybody oppressed and squashed in a certain way when you yourself are so blatantly and obviously, as are all your colleagues, enjoying those trappings of the West that you're trying to keep your people from looking towards.
It's a difficult balancing act. I think a lot of this reflects insecurity. If you look at some of the recent campaigns in Russia on moral issues, Russia is positioning itself as becoming increasingly morally conservative and condemning the West for the West's moral positions on certain issues. And so they feel almost as though there's decay around them and they're upholding traditional values. And that strikes deep in a lot of people. The idea that you're holding on to something traditional in the face of all these modernizing forces that seem to be threatening your way of life, the very thing that identifies what your existence is. And so there's a lot of political capital to be gained from that. We see that around the world, people appealing to traditional values. In fact, in a very slight way, it took place with Brexit. That what it meant to be British and what it meant to be the island race and so on, and all this sort of myth making, it has popular appeal. Putin's harnessed that, but as you say, there's a problem because on the one hand, Russia seems to be rejecting the values of the West, but on the other hand, some of the senior people in Russia epitomize those values.
Yeah.